Do you think nightmares only happen in your sleep? What about those strange moments, those fleeting shadows, or the chills running down your spine while standing alone in the deep woods? In today's video, you'll hear 5 terrifying true stories, experiences that the people involved have never forgotten. And after hearing them, you might not sleep so well either. From a mysterious scream in the Smoky Mountains to the soulless gaze of a mute clown hiding in the bushes. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready to descend into the darkest corners of human memory. Story 1. The man carrying clothes in the woods. I've never forgotten that day. Even though it's been over 50 years, the image remains as vivid as if it happened just yesterday. It was 1969. I was just a kid and my family decided to spend Father's Day weekend hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. To be honest, I wasn't a fan of those kinds of outdoor trips, but I respected my father, and this was what he wanted. About 30 minutes into the hike, we suddenly heard a scream echoing from somewhere deep within the woods. It was hoarse, shrill, filled with desperation, like someone calling for help in their final moments. The sound wasn't exactly close, but not too far either, and it made all of us stop dead in our tracks. My father quickly raised a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. I gripped my mother's hand tightly, eyes fixed on the dark treetops ahead. The atmosphere in that moment. It was like the entire forest was holding its breath. Just a few minutes later, from further up the trail, a figure emerged from the woods. He didn't look at us, didn't greet us, didn't seem alarmed. He just quietly walked past, carrying a bundle of crumpled clothes slung over his shoulder. I remember clearly among the clothes was a tiny red shirt, the kind a small child would wear. He disappeared back into the trees as if he had never been there. My father frowned but said nothing. We kept walking like nothing had happened. Back then I was too young to understand that we had just witnessed something deeply, deeply abnormal. After hiking for over 2 hours, we made it back to the car. Just as we got in, the sky opened up and it started pouring. The rain was so heavy, it blurred the entire mountain in thick mist. Inside the car, my parents quietly discussed everything we saw and decided we would stop by the ranger station on the way back to report what we'd witnessed. At the station, my father told the story. One of the officers listened intently. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "A 6-year-old boy, Dennis Martin, went missing this morning from a campsite less than 5 miles from where you were. Last seen playing hide and seek. And then he just never came back." I still don't know how to describe how I felt at that moment. It was like something reached inside me and crushed my chest. Over the following days, the police called several times asking for more details about the man we saw. It kept raining, making the search efforts incredibly difficult. Thousands of people, from park rangers and military personnel to Boy Scouts, joined the mission. They found small footprints near a creek, but that was all. No one ever found Dennis. No body, no clothing, no clues. Some say the boy got lost and died from exposure. Others say he might have been attacked by a bear. But the theory that's haunted me for decades is that Dennis was kidnapped by that very man I saw that day. Now I'm an old man, but I still remember his face, the way he walked, the shadow that seemed to follow him, even though the sun was still out, and that red piece of cloth poking out from the clothes he carried. I can't say with certainty, but deep down I know he was involved, and that is why I've never gone hiking again. Story 2. The Teacher and the Death in the Wooden Shed. I was 16 that year, a junior in high school in Knoxville, Tennessee. Our new English teacher was named Miss Erin Mlen. My first impression, nothing unusual. Young, gentle, professionally dressed. But just a few months in, things started to shift. She began wearing shorter skirts, tighter tops, and frequently flirted with the male students in class. It wasn't the friendly kind of banter. It was the kind that felt intentional, provocative, especially with one senior student named Sean Powell. Sean was 2 years older than me, tall, charismatic. I noticed that Miss Erin often touched his arm while lecturing. She laughed more than necessary. And Sean, like any 18-year-old guy, seemed to enjoy the attention. Then one day, Sean suddenly dropped out of school. No one knew why. Miss Erin never mentioned him again. But a few weeks later, rumours started spreading around school Sean was living. Behind her house in an old wooden shed that her husband used as a music studio. Her husband Eric was a quiet man, an amateur musician. People said he let Sean stay there because he'd found the boy homeless and wandering. But the truth no one really knew. What I do know is that a few months later Sean had become Erin's lover. Their affair became so obvious that neighbours reported hearing them argue almost every night. And when Eric found out, things unravelled quickly. On the night of March 10th, 2007, Sean came to Erin's house. He was drunk, angry, pounding on the door like he was trying to break it down. Eric answered. They exchanged words. Sean stormed off to his car and sat inside, engine off. But he didn't leave. Eric came out again, this time with a shotgun in his hands. He later said he only meant to scare Sean just to get him to go. But Sean laughed a bold, taunting laugh like someone who had nothing left to lose. He reached out for the gun. And then, the gun went off. The shot hit Sean in the face, ending everything in a single moment. The police arrived. Erin was the one who called them. Eric was arrested that same night. And strangely, she never appeared at her husband's trial, even though he was sentenced to just 90 days for involuntary manslaughter. A year later, Erin was arrested again for taking her 2 kids out of state without permission. The court sentenced her to 90 days in jail. When I learned the full truth, I felt cold inside. Not because of the crime, but because I remembered all the times she used to tease me. The soft words, the subtle looks, things I once mistook for kindness. Sean, a guy just like me, became prey, and Eric, a husband, became a killer trying to protect his family. Now that I have a wife and kids of my own, I think about it more than I'd like to admit. And I've made a promise to myself one day I'll tell my children this story. Because sometimes, even someone standing at the front of the classroom can be the ticking time bomb no one sees coming. Story 3. The Melting Face. I grew up in rural Tennessee, the kind of place where you could stand in the middle of the road for an hour and not see a single car pass by. Every summer I'd visit my grandparents. The place was peaceful, but just remote enough to make you feel like you were being watched whenever a breeze rustled the bushes. The summer I turned 13 on one unbearably hot and stifling night. I just couldn't fall asleep. My dad, always one to look for ways to cool off a restless mind, offered to take me for a late night drive to catch some fresh air. We took the usual winding road through the woods, a dark, twisted path with no streetlights in sight. About 15 minutes in, we stopped at a scenic overlook, one that gave you a full view of the valley below, swallowed in darkness. My dad asked me, "You sure you want to get out?" I hesitated for a second, but when I saw hundreds of fireflies blinking out there in the dark, I nodded. I brought along a small plastic container with holes punched in it, something I always used to catch fireflies, and a small flashlight. As soon as we stepped out and started down the path to the overlook, I heard something. A sound. Light, then heavier, like footsteps, but not the kind you hear when someone's rushing, more like someone standing very close. We both stopped. The trees were thick and the sound suddenly went silent. Then I saw something just within view. A man, standing about 30 meters away. He wasn't moving. He wasn't looking at the scenery like most people would at that spot. He had his back to the view, just standing there staring into the woods. My dad squeezed my hand and whispered, "Back to the car. Now." I had just turned around when his flashlight caught the man's face. And at that exact moment, my dad let out a sound, not loud, but a sound of fear I'd never heard from him before. He dropped the flashlight, grabbed me and ran, dragging me at full speed back to the car. We jumped in, locked the doors, and sped off. Not until we reached the main road did my father speak, and I remember every word he said. His face wasn't a face. It looked like a candle melted down. No nose, just two black holes. Silence. After a long pause, I finally asked, "Was he burned?" My dad just shook his head. Maybe. Or maybe he was someone who had nothing left to lose. The next morning we told my grandma. But instead of brushing it off or laughing like she usually did, she went quiet. Then she said softly, "Last month a meth lab up on the mountain exploded. A few people got burned real bad. One of them ran off into the woods. They don't like people wandering near their spot." I didn't ask anything else. But to this day, I still remember the look on my father's face when that flashlight hit the man. He was a military man, had seen war, blood, and death. But never, not once, had I seen him truly afraid. Since that night, I've never gone into the woods after 10 p.m. because some people don't live on the edge of society. They live on the edge of humanity. Story 4. The Silent Clown. I grew up in the suburbs of Memphis, right on the edge of what people called a rough area. But my childhood was still peaceful, filled with afternoons wandering the neighborhood, tossing rocks into dry grass and exploring places adults constantly warned us not to go near. I was 8 years old that day. My sister, 5 years older than me, asked if I wanted to go for a walk toward the end of the block. Each time we went out, we pushed a little farther. But that day we went farther than ever before, all the way to the edge of an abandoned industrial zone beyond the train tracks. The place looked like a forgotten wasteland, dry grass piles of old industrial, trash-stripped car parts, and the occasional stray dog roaming in the distance. We were walking, chatting about nothing in particular, tossing rocks like usual, when I noticed something move up ahead. At first I thought it was an animal, but as we got closer I realized it was a person. A man standing in the brush, partially hidden behind dry vines and roadside junk, but not a normal man. He wore a black and white striped outfit with a ghostly white painted face, bright red lips, and cartoonishly darkened eyes. He was a silent clown. We both froze. He saw us and immediately began to perform. He didn't say a word. He mimed being trapped inside an invisible box. He tilted his head, widened his eyes, his face overly expressive, as if trying to draw us in. My sister whispered, "Let's go." But I felt hypnotized. My steps slowed, and I took one more step toward him. Just one more, and I would have been right at the edge of the woods. Then he lifted his hand and waved, slowly, invitingly, as if he was asking me to enter his little scene. A fake stage, an invisible cage, or maybe a trap. My sister yanked my arm so hard it nearly knocked me to the ground. We both turned and ran, never looking back. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my head. No one chased us, but the feeling of eyes on our backs pressed down on every step. When we told our parents, they thought we were imagining things. No one believed a silent clown would be lurking around a junkyard in the middle of a sweltering summer afternoon. But I know what I saw. His makeup was smeared not from artistry, but from sweat dirt and time. He didn't look like someone who performed at parks or street corners. He looked like someone who had lived out there for a long, long time, or never left. I never saw him again, but sometimes in my dreams I still see that hand, waving, not fast, not urgent, just slow, like he truly believes that one day I'll come back. Story 5, The Man. Waiting on Bone Road. It was 1993. I was a teenager, and even though I lived in a remote rural part of Tennessee, I had a strange fascination with mysteries, unsolved crimes, and places people whispered had stories. So did my mom. She was an optimistic, tough woman, but also a bit reckless. She once told me if Sherlock Holmes had a daughter, it would have been me. And that day was one of those days. We had just left a family picnic by a natural lake near our home when the sky suddenly opened up with a heavy downpour. Instead of heading straight home like most people would, my mum turned to me and said, "Since we're nearby, wanna drive past the scene of that murder from the other day?" I knew exactly what she meant. The latest homicide in our county, a woman in her 30s had been found at the bottom of a steep ravine right next to a dirt road with a name that already sounded Chillingbone Road. No one knew who she was. She'd moved to town less than a year before. No friends, no family. And when they found her, she had no head. The case shocked the town, but within days people went back to their farms, gossip and Sunday church. Except my mum and me, we decided to go take a look. She pulled out a paper map, this was before GPS and Google Maps, and traced our way across county roads. The rain had just stopped when we reached the turnoff to Bone Road. The road started paved, then turned to gravel, and finally to slick, muddy dirt. Trees surrounded us on all sides. Fog rose from the ground, still wet from the storm. The entire scene looked like something out of a slasher movie. And then right at the sharp bend near where they said the woman's body had been dumped, we weren't alone anymore. A dirty grey pickup truck was parked on the shoulder. Beside it stood a man, greasy hair, unshaven face, filthy clothes. He was leaning against the truck, staring down into the ravine. We slowed down. My mum eased the car to the side. I was sitting in the passenger seat, which meant he was standing just outside my window. He looked right at me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a crooked, half-toothless grin with eyes that had nothing human in them. We passed him slowly. I held my breath. My mum whispered, "Just go to the end of the road, turn around, and we'll get out of here." But we had forgotten one thing. Bone Road is a dead end. We had no choice. We had to turn around, meaning we had to pass by that man again. He was still there, still smiling, like he knew we'd be coming back. My mum said nothing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tight. We drove slowly, hugging the edge of the road, avoiding his gaze. And then we were out. A few days later, the local paper ran the story the killer had been caught. The victim was a woman who had tried to escape an abusive ex-boyfriend, a man who had beaten, controlled, and stalked her for years. He had tracked her down, captured her, and killed her. Then drove around for hours with the body before dumping it down the ravine on Bone Road. When his picture appeared on the front page, my mum and I looked at each other. We didn't say a word. It was him. It was the man who had smiled at me in the woods that day. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And my mum and I, whenever we remember that day, are left with just one chilling thought. If the car had broken down, they might have found 2 more bodies at the bottom of that ravine. Some stories never get an answer. Some images are burned into memory. No security camera needed to capture them. You've just heard 5 chilling encounters, not from movies, not from imagination, but from real people who lived through every terrifying moment. If you've ever experienced something strange, something that still gives you chills, whenever you think about it, share it in the comments below. And remember, the scariest things don't always hide under your bed. Sometimes they're standing silently just beyond the trees, one step away.